Hey guys, welcome back to another Conan Exiles video. I recently finished up telling the complete story of the Age of Sorcery, but there are still some lingering questions there that I think are worth making into their own videos. As you probably know, I like to design my lore videos as one long cinematic experience, so there isn't usually much space to explore these more obscure topics. Therefore, this video is a bit more raw, and I'll be discussing potential outcomes and meanings of different tidbits. Hopefully you guys enjoy this more kind of informal discussion video for smaller or more complicated topics like these. Today we're discussing the relationship between Kurak, Nyarlathotep and Azathoth. In the Age of Sorcery chapter 3 it's revealed that Kurak is working with a dark stranger that appears to be Nyarlathotep to conjure a ritual that will spell doom for the exiled lands. Whilst it may seem antithetical to his own life, destroying the land he stands upon, Kurak has designs beyond regular existence. It seems he intends to ascend to something higher, but as for what he's ascending to, that is yet to be discovered. Most of our information about Kurak and his attitudes can be gleaned from his final speech as he stands defeated. There's a lot of words that are worthy of diving into, so let's begin there. It's quite curious that at the start of his dying declaration, Kurak tells us he was once Kurak the Wretched. To me this seems more like a title rather than the way he just describes himself. Looking at the definition of wretched, it can mean two things: a person in a deplorable state of distress or misfortune, or someone of poor or mean character. I think it's a pretty safe assumption that Kurak was always at least somewhat malicious, but that wouldn't surprise me. I don't think that is truly worthy of the moniker of wretched though. I feel like this perhaps alludes to how he felt before he became Kurak the Sorcerer. Obviously we don't know much about his past, but assuming he was a man of distress or misfortune, it's clear how he could have joined such a dark path. A life of misery could easily lead to desperation, and through his desperation, perhaps Kurak was able to reach out and build up his powers with the assistance of Nyarlathotep. We'll talk more on Nyarlathotep's nature a bit later on. He further warns us that should we flay his flesh, 10,000 nightmares will pour out. This warning is further reinforced with the spectre of his death unleashing the curses of the Outer Dark. At first this sounds like the fairly standard "oh, you'll regret this" kind of threat, but perhaps it hints at something a bit darker. We know Kurak is in communion with Nyarlathotep and is working towards and with some very dark forces. For reasons we'll touch on in a moment, Kurak seems to have transmuted himself from mortality into a different realm of being, and perhaps that transmutation is more than a couple of prayers to a dark god. If he were to truly change from wretched to powerful, he may have had to sacrifice part of himself for that to occur. In a way, Kurak could well be a vessel for the Outer Dark, and if Nyarlathotep is simply using Kurak to push his own agenda, I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility that Nyarlathotep could have infused part of the Outer Dark into Kurak's very being, perhaps to elevate him beyond wretchedness, to ensure that Kurak would follow his orders. It's also possible, given the context of the next line, that the corruption that riddles Kurak's body is a physical manifestation of the Outer Dark. Kurak says, and I am about to butcher this pronunciation, Yag Manahan Bathunk Throd Oa, which directly translates to "my worthless body trembles." Many of the sorcerer's powers wielded by Kurak and other sorcerers rely on a dark, arcane magic drawn from the very depths of realms far too complex and demonic for us to understand. The Outer Dark seems to be a sort of incorporeal plane, but also a source of great power. As we use that power, it corrupts our souls, discolouring our skin and taking our very life with it. Perhaps Kurak has suffered so much corruption that the manifestation of the Outer Dark within him has become something of a dead man's hand, in that killing him will release that pent-up energy. Later on, Kurak tells us that he has gone beyond death. He describes erasing his name from the Book of Life, and instead scribing it into the Book of Azathoth. The Book of Life, whilst not necessarily a physical item, is very clearly analogous for mortality. Every man is born with his name in the Book of Life, and when he dies his name is removed. But what is the Book of Azathoth? Azathoth, the sleeping chaos, is an outer god and a supreme omnipotent deity that lies somewhere outside reality. First appearing in H.P. Lovecraft's short story The Dream Quest of Unknown Kadath, Azathoth is the creator of all. He is the father of Nyarlathotep, Cthulhu, Shub, Yog, Tsathoggua, and many powerful deities, but Azathoth is the true source of ultimate power. Some sources state that should he awaken, reality itself will simply cease to exist. In H.P. Lovecraft's The Dreams in the Witch House, we learn a little more about the Book of Azathoth. Keziah Mason, the witch, appears in the dreams of our protagonist Walter Gilman, and that is where we learn more details of the Book of Azathoth. I'll read a direct passage from that book now. He must meet the Black Man, and go with them all to the throne of Azathoth at the centre of ultimate chaos. He must sign in his own blood the Book of Azathoth, and take a new secret name. With this, we can assume that the Book of Azathoth is something of a tome, physical or otherwise, that denotes some deeper connection to Azathoth himself. Due to the nature of the book needing to be signed in blood, it clearly shows some form of sacrifice, perhaps sacrificing one's physical form, at least partially, to attain a greater level of power or connection. But what does that mean in practicality? Within the context of the quote I read a moment ago, the witch Keziah Mason, her pet humanoid rat Brown Jenkin, and the Black Man, who is of course Nyarlathotep, are working together. They lead Gilman to the Book of Azathoth to sign his name away and aid them in a ritual later on. The ritual involves the kidnap and subsequent sacrifice of an infant. I couldn't quite tell what the ritual is intended to do, but it does seem it's related to Azathoth himself, or perhaps Shub, but that's aside from our original point. What does it actually mean for Kurak to have signed his name into the Book of Azathoth? Through this source in The Dreams in the Witch House, we can begin to make some inferences. Firstly, in Kurak's own implications, he seems to hint at a more eternal nature. Perhaps his death is indeed the end of his physical form, but the power of Almighty Azathoth will keep his soul, his essence, alive and present somewhere in the universe. That being said, it is very clear that Kurak himself is not an almighty being, and instead, his power is a gift. Nyarlathotep serves as the messenger of the outer gods. He is their heart and soul, and enacts their will on Earth and elsewhere in the universe. However, unlike most of the gods, Nyarlathotep is a little different. Even the most powerful beings have no clear purpose or agenda, and frankly are pretty much apathetic to human life at best. Nyarlathotep, however, is clearly hostile. He's deceptive and manipulative, making him one of the very few malicious deities in the mythos. Whilst Kurak may serve, his powers are likely not just a gift of fealty. Nyarlathotep surely has some dark agenda, and through his deceptive nature, it's far from unreasonable to assume that him bestowing eternal life on Kurak and his powers is simply a tactical choice to ensure he follows and executes his will. That is not to say that Kurak's power is placebo. He is clearly a potent sorcerer, but his power comes at great cost. Whilst his physical form is of course riddled with corruption, it appears his soul may indeed be bound to the whims of Nyarlathotep, or even worse, Azathoth. This could quite easily mean that, as Kurak fails to execute his ritual, Nyarlathotep may simply just revoke his powers, or may leave him to the fate of being slain by the exile, as Nyarlathotep likely has no care for Kurak if he can no longer serve his purpose. Through Kurak's speech, it's easy to infer that he believes he'll be saved from the doom he's summoning. If his lair is indeed somewhere in the exiled lands, which I believe is a fairly safe bet, it would surely be destroyed by his ritual. This seems like an act of suicide, but Kurak doesn't seem to care. He's built an empire, a cult of sorcerers following his every whim, so why is he not afraid of death? Where does he think he'll go after the doom swallows the exiled lands? It's hard to say. Nyarlathotep could have offered him anything. He could have promised to whisk him away from the doom at the last moment, or to give him the power to survive. It's also possible that the doom in this case is similar to the ritual that takes place in the dreams in the witch house, the blood of the prisoners of the exiled lands serving as an offering to Azathoth. Kurak may have again been spared, instead going on to reside in the spiral black vortices of the ultimate void of chaos wherein Azathoth reigns. Again, it's hard to know for sure, but I think it's safe to assume that Kurak believed, correctly or otherwise, that there was more for him after death. It could even be a bit darker in that Nyarlathotep had promised to transform him into a god should he follow his orders, but that might just be a bit of Bloodborne inspiration that I'm thinking of. I think the most important question here, aside from what would have happened to Kurak or what did happen after his death, is of course the aims of Nyarlathotep. Given that he's only just shown up and has remained veiled in mystery, it's honestly up for debate. The whims of Azathoth are often described as fitful, and can often make no sense, yet Nyarlathotep follows them regardless. It's also possible that Nyarlathotep himself is working towards his own personal goals away from Azathoth, as he does have a taste for spreading madness. I don't think we'll know his true intentions for a while, but I do think it's probably safe to say that Nyarlathotep isn't going to just disappear as Kurak dies. A deity as powerful as Nyarlathotep wouldn't be thwarted by something as simple as this, and whilst it might take some time, I do believe Nyarlathotep will once again become a driving force behind chaos in the exiled lands, or perhaps even further afield. Thank you for watching. I'm aware there's a lot of context and background information for the topics we've discussed here, but I'm looking forward to hearing what your opinion is. Also, hopefully you enjoyed the more informal style. It's definitely something I'd like to do again for topics that are much harder to fit into a typical lore video. If you'd like to see me look into any of those topics, then feel free to leave it in a comment and I'll see what I can do. As always, a massive thanks to our wonderful esteemed coffee cultists for continuing to support the channel over on Patreon. Again, thanks for watching, take care, and I'll see you soon.